The city of Chicago was wrapped in a blanket of snow, its streets glowing with holiday lights that blinked like beacons of joy against the dark winter sky. Stores were closing early. Couples hurried past with last-minute gifts tucked under their arms, and the air carried the scent of cinnamon, pine, and roasted chestnuts from a vendor parked near Millennium Park. It was Christmas Eve, but not for everyone. Sitting alone on a bench, just beyond the skating rink, in the kind of silence that didn't ask for permission, was Ethan Riley. At 32, he was the youngest founder of a multi-million-dollar logistics firm in the Midwest, praised in Forbes, admired on LinkedIn, envied at alumni dinners. But tonight, none of that mattered. Wrapped in a charcoal peacoat that cost more than most people's rent, Ethan looked like a man who had everything. But if you studied the slump of his shoulders, the way his gloved hands rested too still in his lap, you'd see the cracks. He wasn't avoiding a party. He had skipped dozens. He wasn't traveling. He could fly anywhere. He was just here, alone, as he had been every Christmas for the last 5 years. His phone buzzed again. A family group chat filled with photos of champagne flutes, luxury fireplaces, and performative cheer. He turned the screen over and closed his eyes. All around him, the city was alive. But inside, Ethan felt more absent than ever. That's when he heard the tiny shuffle of boots. When he opened his eyes, a little girl stood in front of him, no older than 4, bundled in a faded pink coat that had clearly seen many winters. Her cheeks were rosy, her hair curled under a knitted hat with one floppy ear, and in her mittened hand, she held a paper bag smeared with crayon drawings. She looked up at him, not scared, not shy, just curious. "Excuse me," she said in a soft but confident voice. "Do you want to have dinner with me and my mom tonight?" Ethan blinked. Of all the things he expected from this night, this wasn't on the list. He cleared his throat, unsure if she was even talking to him. "Dinner," she nodded, her bright eyes sparkling with something impossibly pure. "We made spaghetti. And cookies. You can have one if you want. Mommy says we should share Christmas with people who look lonely." It hit him like a punch. Not the words, but the sincerity. Before he could answer, the girl took a step closer and gently tugged on his hand. "Please." There was a pause, a silence thick enough to carry 1,000 unspoken things. Then, with slow hesitation, Ethan stood. He didn't ask for her name, didn't look for a parent. He just followed. They walked together down Michigan Avenue, her little hands swinging in his, her feet kicking up tiny puffs of snow with every step. People glanced. Some smiled, some looked confused, but Ethan didn't care. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about the next deal, the next crisis, the next empty holiday dinner. He was just moving forward. As they turned onto a side street lined with old apartment buildings and string lights clinging to wrought iron balconies, the world felt quieter, like time had slowed down just for them. The girl suddenly stopped in front of a weathered brick building with a small wreath taped crookedly to the door. "This is it," she declared proudly. "We live on the 2nd floor." The door creaked open before she could knock, and a woman stepped out, grocery bag in one hand, surprise in her eyes. "Maya," she said, glancing from her daughter to the well-dressed stranger beside her. "Who's this?" "He's going to eat dinner with us," Maya said matter-of-factly. He looked sad. The woman stared for a long moment, measuring, assessing, uncertain. Ethan started to speak, to explain, to excuse himself, but then she stepped aside. "Come in," she said softly. And just like that, Ethan Riley, CEO, Forbes featured, holiday orphan, stepped into a small, dimly lit apartment that smelled of garlic, warm bread, and something else he hadn't felt in years. "Welcome." The door clicked softly behind Ethan, shutting out the chill of Christmas Eve and sealing him into something warmer, something oddly unfamiliar. The apartment was small, maybe 600 square feet at best. Faint jazz music played from a scratchy speaker on the kitchen counter. A worn love seat sat under the window, its cushions mismatched but clearly well-loved. The walls were covered in a patchwork of paper snowflakes, finger-painted trees, and one particularly proud crayon drawing of a snowman with enormous eyes labeled Sir Wiggles in shaky letters. Ethan stood in the entryway awkwardly, not sure whether to take off his shoes or run. "I'm Claire," the woman said, setting the grocery bag on a tiny kitchen table already set with 3 plates. "Maya's mom." "Ethan," he replied. Sorry, this wasn't exactly planned. Claire nodded, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Nothing ever is with Maya. She thinks Christmas is about rescuing people. Maya twirled in place before hopping up onto one of the chairs and pointing triumphantly to the empty seat across from her. That's yours. He looked at the tiny plastic chair, its legs uneven, its back wobbly, but her face was beaming like she'd just built him a throne. So he sat. Claire ladled spaghetti onto their plates, humming softly, and passed around slices of garlic bread that were more toast than bread. She poured juice into plastic tumblers, one of them slightly cracked. And yet, Ethan had never seen a table look more festive. Maya picked up her fork with the ceremony of royalty and said, "We have to say the good words first." "The good words?" Ethan asked. Claire glanced over with a smile. "She means grace." Maya closed her eyes tightly and clasped her hands. "Thank you for the noodles and the cookies, and for bringing a friend, because Mommy says we always have room." "Amen." "Amen," Claire echoed softly. Ethan paused. Then, quietly, "Amen." The spaghetti was overcooked. The bread slightly burnt. The cookies, when they arrived later, were just sugar and a whole lot of sprinkles. But Ethan couldn't stop eating. Not because he was hungry, but because the warmth in the room fed something far deeper. Maya chattered the whole time, about her preschool, about how Sir Wiggles was a real snowman who danced at night, and about how Mommy's smile comes out more when we have company. Claire flushed at that, shooting Maya a look that was part embarrassment, part affection. But Ethan was frozen. He had sat at 10-course tasting menus, eaten filet mignon on rooftop terraces, clinked glasses in rooms filled with polished smiles and ulterior motives. But this was different. There was no performance here. No networking, no agenda, no small talk to fill the silence. Just a little girl who believed dinner could heal strangers, and a woman who looked like she'd held the world together with her bare hands. At one point, Maya climbed down and walked over to Ethan with a serious look on her face. "You don't look sad anymore," she said matter-of-factly. "I think you were just hungry for family." Claire froze mid-bite. Ethan looked down at her, caught off guard by the weight of that sentence. He should have laughed it off, made a joke, changed the subject. But instead, something caught in his throat. "Yeah," he said hoarsely. "I think maybe you're right." Maya nodded like a tiny oracle, then returned to her noodles as if she hadn't just cracked open a stranger's soul. After dinner, Claire cleared the dishes while Maya crawled onto the couch and wrapped herself in a faded fleece blanket. The lights from the small plastic Christmas tree in the corner blinked with stubborn cheer. It leaned slightly to the left. "You don't have to stay," Claire said softly as she scrubbed the plates. "I know this is probably a lot." Ethan stood by the kitchen doorway, watching her, hands in his pockets. "It's not a lot," he said. "It's the first time Christmas has made sense in years." She looked up at him, and in that glance, something passed between them. Not romantic, not yet. Just recognition of someone else carrying something invisible and heavy. "Besides," he added, nodding toward the sleeping child, "I think your daughter is on a mission to fix me." Claire smiled. "She fixes everyone, one crayon drawing at a time." Later, as he stepped out into the snowy night, Ethan realized his chest felt strange, lighter, fuller, something he couldn't name yet. But he knew this. He would come back. 2 days after Christmas, the city still wore its festive face. Storefronts decked in fading garland, snowbanks stained with street grit, and holiday lights blinking with that lazy persistence that lingers long after the magic fades. Ethan Riley stood once more in front of the same weathered building on West Palmer Street, a brown paper bag clutched awkwardly in one hand. Inside was a small box of donuts, 3, to be precise, one with rainbow sprinkles. He remembered Maya's excitement when she'd mentioned them. He hesitated before knocking. It wasn't just about the donuts. It wasn't just about Maya. Something in that apartment, its warmth, its simplicity, the way laughter replaced silence, had stayed with him, haunted him in the best way. The door opened before he could talk himself out of it. Claire stood there in jeans and a hoodie, a dish towel slung over her shoulder, her hair pulled into a loose braid. Her eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't look displeased. "Hey," she said, stepping aside. "Come on in." The apartment looked the same, but lived in differently. The Christmas tree still blinked from its place in the corner, more lopsided than ever. A coloring book lay open on the floor, Maya's crayon strewn like confetti across the rug. Maya's head popped up from behind the couch. "Ethan!" she shrieked, barreling toward him. "You came back. Did you bring snacks?" He grinned, holding up the bag like a trophy. "3 donuts. I hope that qualifies." Maya grabbed it like it held the crown jewels and plopped onto the floor, examining each donut as if selecting a gemstone. Claire watched the scene unfold with a quiet smile. "You didn't have to," she said softly. "I wanted to," Ethan replied. He followed her into the kitchen, the same one where mismatched dishes still filled the rack and magnets held up drawings of flying unicorns and lopsided hearts. He leaned against the counter as she poured 2 cups of coffee, one chipped mug reading World's Okayest Mom. "You run a company," she said casually, stirring sugar into his cup. "And yet you show up here with donuts for a 4-year-old who invited you to dinner. Not exactly a boardroom move." Ethan smirked. Maybe the boardroom's overrated. They sat at the table, Maya humming to herself on the floor while coloring a purple giraffe. The apartment wasn't much, but somehow it felt more like a home than Ethan's penthouse ever had. He glanced around. "You live here long?" Claire nodded. 6 years. Ever since I had Maya. "You always this grounded?" She chuckled. "You mean broke?" "I mean balanced," he clarified. She shrugged, her tone light, but her eyes revealing deeper years. "You get good at appreciating things when you don't have much. You learn to spot what really matters." He looked down at his coffee, turning the mug slowly in his hands. "I don't think I ever learned that." Claire tilted her head, studying him. "No one teaches you how to be content. You just kind of figure it out when the noise fades." Silence stretched between them, but not an awkward one. It was the kind that said stay as long as you want. Maya interrupted it, holding up a picture she just finished. "Look, it's us. That's you, Ethan, and that's Mommy, and that's me. And we're all eating donuts forever." Ethan took the drawing carefully. Crayon lines, crooked smiles, and stick legs. But somehow, it felt like a masterpiece. Claire leaned over to look and laughed. "You gave him red hair." "I ran out of brown," Maya said matter-of-factly. Ethan laughed, then folded the drawing and tucked it into his coat pocket. "I'm keeping this," he said. "Best gift I've gotten in years." Later, as he helped Claire unscrew a flickering light bulb in the kitchen, one she had clearly been ignoring for weeks, he realized how natural this all felt. No pretense, no image to maintain, just moments that strung together like lights on a string, quiet but illuminating. "You really don't have to do this," she said as he balanced on a step stool. "I know," he said, twisting in the new bulb. "But I want to." When the light flickered to life, Maya clapped like he had summoned the sun. Claire looked up at him, her voice soft. "You know, most people don't come back." Ethan paused, stepping down. "I'm not most people." And she smiled, not politely, not out of obligation, but like someone who, just maybe, was starting to believe that. As he left that night, Maya handed him a sugar cookie shaped like a heart and whispered, "Next time, you get the good seat next to me." He walked back into the snowy street with a full heart and a crooked cookie. And for the first time in years, he couldn't wait to come back. It was a Thursday night in early January when Ethan found himself once again in Claire's kitchen, sleeves rolled up, drying dishes with a fraying towel. Outside, the wind rattled the old windows, sending brief gusts of snow swirling across the glass. Inside, the apartment glowed in soft yellow light. Faint music playing from the Bluetooth speaker Maya had commandeered for her own personal playlist, which currently looped a dramatic Disney ballad. Maya had fallen asleep an hour earlier, curled up under a blanket fort she'd built beside the couch, her plush dinosaur clutched tightly in one arm. Ethan handed Claire another rinsed plate. She took it without speaking, the easy rhythm of shared chores bridging the usual awkwardness of silence. Finally, she broke it. "You don't talk about your family," she said, not accusatory, just curious. Ethan hesitated. "Not much to say." She gave a small smile. "There's always something to say, even when it hurts." He dried his hands, pulled out a chair, and sat. Claire followed, setting the last dish on the rack before taking the seat across from him. After a moment, he began. "My dad is a legacy man, third-generation CEO. My mom hosted galas, ran foundations. We had Christmas parties with ice sculptures in the shape of swans. But no one ever sat down together. No one asked how you were unless it was a setup for a favor. Claire leaned in, her expression open but unreadable. I got out as soon as I could. Built my own company. Didn't touch a cent of the family trust. For a while, that made me feel proud. Independent. He exhaled. But pride doesn't keep you warm when you're eating Chinese takeout alone on Christmas. Claire didn't fill the silence. She just let it sit, safe, without pressure. What about you? He asked, gently flipping the question. She looked down at her hands. I was 21. In college. Studying elementary edition fell for someone who said the right things at the right time. Ethan didn't interrupt. When I told him I was pregnant, he vanished. My parents said they couldn't support my decision, that I was throwing away my future. So I left. You raised Maya on your own? She nodded. I cleaned houses. Waitressed. Temp jobs. We lived in a motel for 3 months when she was a baby. There were days I didn't eat, so she could. Ethan's chest tightened. Claire. She waved it off with a small smile. I don't tell you this for pity. I tell you because you asked. He shook his head. No, it's more than that. You did all of it alone. You gave her love, stability, joy. That's not just strong. That's extraordinary. Her eyes softened, but she didn't look away. Strength isn't the absence of fear, Ethan. It's doing the next right thing, even when you're scared out of your mind. He looked at her then, not like a man flirting, but like someone seeing a person in full, maybe for the first time. You ever get angry? He asked. At your parents? The guy who left. Of course, she said quietly. But I figured out something early. She leaned back, hands wrapped around her mug of tea. Anger burns the fuel you need to survive. And blaming the storm won't keep you dry. You just find a better coat. That line settled deep inside him. They sat in silence for a moment. The only sounds were Maya's gentle breathing under the blanket fort and the hum of the refrigerator. Then Claire reached across the table and placed her hand lightly over his. You're not broken, Ethan, she said. You're just waiting to be real in a world that keeps asking you to fake it. He didn't respond with words. Instead, he turned his hand upward and wrapped his fingers around hers. No pretense, no mask, just two people who had been carrying the weight of their lives for far too long, finally setting it down for a while. And somehow, that quiet honesty was the beginning of everything. Snow had turned to sleet, and sleet into biting wind. By the time Ethan made it to the second-floor landing of Claire's building, he was half frozen, half thrilled. He cradled a small box in one hand, wrapped in tissue paper and tucked inside a plain brown bag. No bows, no branding, but its weight felt monumental. When the door opened, Claire blinked in surprise. Ethan, she said, brushing a curl from her face. It's freezing out. Are you okay? He stepped inside, stomping snow from his boots. I'm good. Just had something I wanted to give you. She looked at him curiously as he pulled the box from the bag and handed it over. Maya, who had been coloring at the table, popped her head up like a prairie dog. Is it a toy? She asked excitedly. Nope. Grown-up stuff this time. Ethan smiled. Claire sat on the edge of the couch and unwrapped the box slowly, lifting the lid like she was afraid something fragile might spill out. Inside was a cream-colored knit scarf, soft, thick, and finely made. The kind of scarf that wrapped around you like a promise. She stilled. I saw this, she murmured, almost to herself. 2 winters ago. I lost mine on the blue line. I told Maya I didn't need it, that it was just a scarf. You mentioned it, Ethan said softly. Right after Christmas. You were folding laundry, and I asked why you were shivering. You said, it's silly to miss a scarf, and then you laughed. But you didn't mean it. Claire's fingers brushed the delicate stitching. She blinked rapidly, trying to stay composed. You remembered that? Ethan's eyes didn't leave hers. I forget names 5 minutes after meetings. But I remembered that. He took a slow breath. Because you're the first person I've wanted to remember. A silence followed. Not awkward, not uncertain. Just full. Claire didn't speak right away. She folded the scarf neatly, her hands almost reverent. Thank you, she finally whispered. Not for the scarf. For listening. Really listening. Maya broke the spell by hopping onto the couch with a wide grin. Can I try it on? Claire laughed through misty eyes. I think it might eat you alive. They spent the evening in easy warmth. Claire wore the scarf while making dinner, despite the stove warming the kitchen. Maya giggled and called it Mommy's magic cape. Ethan didn't stay long, just enough to feel the rhythm of their little world again. Before he left, Claire walked him to the door. You didn't have to do that, she said. Most people, they don't notice things like scarves. He shrugged. I'm not most people. She gave him a look, fond, almost teasing. I'm starting to believe that. He hesitated for a second. Claire, I don't know what this is becoming. I just know I like who I am when I'm here. With you too. Claire's eyes dropped, then rose again, steady and kind. You don't have to name it yet, Ethan. Just don't disappear. I won't. The door closed behind him, and she leaned against it for a long moment, scarf pressed to her chest. He hadn't said he loved her. She hadn't said she was falling. But in that simple, heartfelt gift, a scarf that wrapped warmth around memory, they'd said everything that mattered. March arrived like a whisper, melting snow giving way to puddles and muddy sidewalks. In a modest apartment on the second floor of an aging Chicago walk-up, the scent of strawberry frosting filled the air. Streamers clung to the walls with scotch tape, and paper butterflies, colored by crayon and fierce little hands, fluttered from windows like spring had finally decided to settle indoors. Today was Maya's 4th birthday. Claire knelt in the living room, adjusting the frilly hem of her daughter's lavender princess dress. The little girl twirled once, then twice, giggling as her glittery tiara slid sideways on her forehead. Is he coming soon? Maya asked for the 5th time in 20 minutes, eyes darting toward the door. Claire paused, smoothing the fabric along Maya's shoulders. He said he'd try, sweetheart. But he promised, Maya said firmly, crossing her arms. Claire stood, turning away just long enough to blink hard and exhale. Ethan had promised, and she wanted to believe he'd keep it. But the last text had come 2 nights ago, and there hadn't been a follow-up since. She didn't blame him. After all, he was halfway across the world. At that exact moment, thousands of miles away, Ethan sat alone in a glass-walled hotel suite high above Singapore's skyline. The city buzzed below with a steady hum, bright with the sharp lines of success and movement, but Ethan felt none of it. The merger had gone through. The client, whose last-minute demands had moved the meeting to today, was finally satisfied. The contract was signed. By every measure, it had been a win. And yet, he stared at his phone like a man who'd failed. On the table before him sat a small velvet box. Inside, nestled in satin, was a silver bracelet engraved with looping cursive letters. Maya and Claire, my home forever. He'd picked out weeks ago, not because of some plan or moment of grandeur, but because it felt true. He rose from the couch, walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, and stared out at the steel and glass horizon. His chest tightened. What am I doing here? He wondered. Everything he wanted was in a small apartment in Chicago, with a girl in a princess dress and a woman who'd never asked him for anything except to be present. He turned from the window, picked up his phone, and dialed. Reschedule my meetings, he told his assistant. Get me on the next flight home. But I said rebook. I'm going home. Back in Chicago, the birthday party buzzed with kids from the neighborhood daycare, tiny voices screaming over frosting and juice boxes. Claire kept glancing at the door, her smile fading with each passing hour. The candles had been lit, the cake cut. Maya had laughed, but kept looking. He forgot. She whispered to one of her stuffed animals on the couch. Then, the doorbell rang. Claire opened it slowly. Ethan stood there, windswept, breathless, and holding the velvet box like it was his final offering. Maya saw him and screamed in delight, racing across the room like a comet in glitter shoes. You came. Ethan scooped her up and hugged her close. I promised, didn't I? Claire approached them slowly, her heart pounding. You made it, she whispered. He handed her the box. She opened it, and her breath caught. It's beautiful, she said, voice trembling. I missed the cake, Ethan murmured, but I made it to what matters. Claire didn't answer. She just reached up and placed a hand gently on his cheek. Tired eyes, soft touch, everything unsaid still understood. That night, after the guests were gone and the last paper crown had been tucked away, Ethan sat on the couch with Maya fast asleep against his shoulder. Claire brought him a mug of tea and settled beside him. The bracelet glinted on her wrist. I wasn't sure you'd come, she admitted. I wasn't sure either, he confessed. But somewhere over the Pacific, I realized this isn't just a visit anymore. It's a part of me. They didn't need to define it. Not that night. But between the flickering kitchen light, the smell of leftover frosting, and the soft weight of a child who trusted him completely. Ethan knew. He wasn't a guest anymore. He was home. The next Christmas came faster than anyone expected, arriving not with grand parades or glittering galas, but with simple things. Paper stars taped to windows, the scent of cinnamon baked into every corner of Claire's apartment, and Maya spinning in circles to a holiday playlist that had grown far too familiar. The small apartment had changed in quiet ways. There was a new bookshelf, handmade ornaments for Maya's preschool class, and a third chair at the kitchen table that had never once gone unused since Easter. Ethan had become part of their rhythm, like sugar and coffee, like a favorite song you hum without realizing. He picked up Maya from daycare when Claire worked late shifts, brought groceries before she even knew the fridge was empty, and fixed everything from squeaky doors to Maya's broken snow globe with equal care. Yet, despite how close they'd grown, Ethan still carried a question in his pocket, quite literally. In the top drawer of his nightstand sat a modest ring box, small and velvet and heavy with meaning. He'd had it for weeks, unsure of how or when to ask the question that had taken root in his heart since spring. On Christmas Eve, as soft snow began to fall over Chicago once again, Claire and Ethan hosted a small gathering in their apartment. Nothing extravagant, just a few neighbors. The single mom from downstairs, the retired schoolteacher who baked banana bread for everyone, and Mr. Novak, the widower next door who always fed the birds. Maya wore a green dress that sparkled when she spun, her cheeks flushed from too many cookies and too much joy. The tree in the corner blinked merrily, decorated with crooked stars, paper chains, and, tucked near the base, the scarf Ethan had given Claire last winter. Ethan stood by the doorway for a moment, taking it all in, laughter echoing, mugs clinking, the scent of rosemary and warm bread in the air. Claire was across the room, her red dress catching the glow of the tree lights, her head thrown back in a rare and unguarded laugh. That was the moment he knew. It had to be now. He reached into his coat pocket and wrapped his fingers around the velvet box. His heart thudded, harder than board meetings, louder than any crowd. As the music faded into a softer tune, he crossed the room and took Claire's hand. She looked at him, surprised but smiling. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he gently tugged her toward the center of the room, beneath the Christmas tree. Maya, sensing something special, followed but stopped just shy of them, her hands clasped beneath her chin. Claire, Ethan began, his voice steady despite the weight of everything he felt. I used to think Christmas was about grand parties. I thought success meant noise, power, headlines. He reached into his pocket and knelt. Not for spectacle, but for sincerity. But then you let me in, he said. You fed me spaghetti at a plastic table. You gave me a scarf and a second chance. You showed me that love doesn't need chandeliers. It just needs a place to sit. Claire covered her mouth, her eyes already glistening. You gave me a seat, Ethan whispered, and I've never wanted to get up since. He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, elegant, unassuming, exactly like her. You don't have to say yes to forever, he said. Just say yes to always coming home to this. Maya couldn't hold it in anymore. Say yes, Mommy. Say yes. The room burst into soft laughter. Claire looked at Ethan, the world narrowing to just his face and the little girl bouncing behind him. With tears slipping down her cheeks, she nodded. Yes, she whispered, her voice catching. Ethan stood, slipping the ring on her finger as the room clapped gently. He pulled her into a hug, holding her like a man who had finally found the place he'd spent his life building from the outside in. Maya crashed into them a second later, arms wrapped around their legs, shouting, Now we're all married. The neighbors smiled. Mr. Novak wiped a tear. Someone poured more cider. And under that crooked tree, with blinking lights and handmade ornaments, a family wasn't just formed. It was sealed. Not by law, not by blood, but by presence. By promises kept. By the quiet kind of love that doesn't knock. It stays. A year passed. Snow came and went. Spring burst through cracked sidewalks. Summer brought open windows and sticky popsicles. And fall wrapped the city in golden light, reminding everyone that change, when done gently, could be beautiful. But inside apartment 2B, something more profound had changed. Claire, Ethan, and Maya now lived together. Not in a penthouse or a sleek high-rise, but in a slightly bigger apartment 3 blocks away, with creaky floors, slanted ceilings, and windows that caught the best morning sun. It wasn't perfect. The plumbing groaned, the radiator hissed, and the laundry room smelled faintly of burnt toast for reasons no one could explain. But it was theirs. The living room was always scattered with toys, puzzle pieces, and Maya's endless art projects. Crayon suns, paper hearts, a 3-legged unicorn named Sparkle, and always, somewhere, a little chair set aside just for Ethan, which Maya had labeled Daddy's spot in bright, uneven marker. He had never asked for the title. Claire hadn't suggested it. But one quiet morning, Maya had crawled into his lap, pressed her small hand to his cheek, and said, "You feel like a daddy." He hadn't stopped smiling for the rest of the day. Claire began teaching part-time at the community center, running music classes for children. It wasn't the prestigious classroom she once dreamed of, but the paper stars Maya had helped hang from the ceiling made it better than anything she'd imagined. Ethan scaled back his work hours, not out of obligation, but out of desire. Deals could wait. Meetings could be rescheduled. But bedtime stories, pancake breakfasts, and Sunday walks through the park, those moments were the real legacy he wanted to leave behind. They built traditions. Movie nights on Fridays, pancake mountains every Sunday, and a game where Maya would hide one sock from every pair in the house and dare Ethan to find the secret missing treasure. He never won. The apartment's kitchen now held a calendar covered in sticky notes, meal plans, and birthday reminders. There was always a third plate on the table, always an extra chair, always space for more. One night, as winter settled back over Chicago, Maya sat at the window, tracing shapes into the foggy glass. The Christmas tree blinked quietly in the corner, taller now, fuller, decorated with both store-bought ornaments and her handmade stars. Ethan stood beside it, coffee in hand, watching Claire as she tucked Maya in a bed with a story and a kiss. There was no drama, no grand finale, just soft smiles, whispered love, the ordinary magic of knowing, really knowing, you were where you belonged. He thought back to that cold Christmas Eve over a year ago, sitting alone on a park bench, believing he had everything while carrying absolutely nothing. And now he had home, not because he owned it, not because he'd earned it, but because two people, one small and giggling, one strong and steadfast, had opened the door and let him in. No more empty chairs, no more pretending, just a warm table, a crooked tree, and love that stayed. There are stories that sweep you away with epic journeys, dramatic twists, or battles fought with swords and fire. But then, there are stories like this one. Quiet, gentle, true. Stories where the most powerful moments happen not in boardrooms or ballrooms, but around chipped mugs of tea, under flickering lights, and beside children who believe in magic simply because no one ever told them not to. Ethan didn't set out to find love. Claire wasn't searching for rescue. And Maya, well, she just wanted someone to eat spaghetti with. But in that small apartment, beneath paper snowflakes and overcooked cookies, something rare and lasting took root. A man who had everything learned what it meant to belong. A woman who had lost everything opened her heart again. And a child who simply believed brought them both home. Because sometimes, family isn't formed by blood or history, but by kindness, by presence, by showing up and staying. And maybe that's what makes this story so special. It reminds us that love doesn't always arrive in grand declarations. Sometimes, it comes in the form of a red scarf, a birthday promise kept, or a seat left open at the table. So if you've ever felt alone, if you've ever wondered whether someone might see you, choose you, or come back for you, hold on. Sometimes the smallest hands lead us to the biggest love. And sometimes all it takes to change a life is a little girl looking up at a lonely stranger and asking softly, "Do you want to have dinner with us?"